Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this event with Dorothy Walters, who has presented various times for Caritas. This is the Caritas Consciousness Project, and she will be reading excerpts and assisted by local artist and energy practitioner, Aprylisa Snyder, who will be reading some excerpts as well. And let me show you her book, and then I will introduce. So this is the book, Kundalini Wonder, The God, Goddess in Your Body. Okay. It is, many of Dorothy's books are poetry, because she's a wonderful poet. This one is not, however. This is narrative. So it's available on Amazon. So she will be discussing many aspects of Kundalini as it's manifesting in today's world. This work is, as I mentioned, it's a collection of narrative prose, not poetry. And let me tell you a little bit about Dorothy Walters. She was an avid reader from childhood and went on predictably to take a Ph.D. in English and American literature. She first taught at Colorado University, and later at Wichita, Kansas State University. While in Kansas, she helped to found one of the earlier women's studies programs in the nation, and she served as the director of that program for many years. In 1981, she underwent dramatic, spontaneous Kundalini awakening into extreme ecstasy and inner vision. But there were no gurus or teachers near her at the time, and indeed Kundalini itself was virtually unknown in the West. So she was thus forced to undergo her initiation alone as she underwent prolonged transformation of her physical, mental, and spiritual natures. In 1988, she moved to San Francisco, where she continued to monitor her own ongoing Kundalini unfolding and to research its nature and aspects. And there, she continued to follow her personal interest in such areas as extrasensory perception, alien visitors, psychic phenomena, and spiritual transformation. She has published a spiritual memoir titled Unmasking the Rose, and also many volumes of mystical poetry, the most recent being the Kundalini Poems. Dorothy has several presentations on YouTube, many with Andrew Harvey, you've heard of him, as well as an interview on Buddha at the Gas Pump, which is by Batgap. And that's also on YouTube. Kundalini Wonder is the distillation of many years of research, reflection, and experience. Alone in the early years of her process, she's gratified to observe the acceleration of awakenings happening today. She often offers free counsel to those undergoing personal spiritual transformation. If you think you've had a Kundalini experience and you're not sure, or you don't know what to make of it, or you don't know what to do with it, just contact Dorothy and she's happy to help you. She is at present preparing a new book of poems for publication, currently titled Channeling God, Poems of Transfiguration and Mutation. She now lives in Colorado and loves her life there. She recently celebrated her 92nd birthday. Still publishing books. Quite a phenomena. And so I will hand the mic over to Dorothy and Aprylisa. Just take it from here.
Thank you, Gloria. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you, though, in a special. I love what you're doing with this Caritas site. It's so important that we all have a way to get together and share our experiences and learn new information about our journeys. And you're doing it. And I just think that's wonderful. We need it so much. I have a kind of a personal motto, and it is, consider your friends as life jackets. And boy, we need life jackets these days, don't we? So thank you, Gloria, and thank all of you who've come. I love it that we're going to be able to be together for the next couple of hours. I went to a workshop a few years ago, and one of the women there said to me, just think, we're going to get to talk about Kundalini for just 2 or 3 days. Well, we're not going to talk for 2 or 3 days, but we are going to have a couple of hours to talk about what is, for me, frankly, I think it's the most important topic in the world. I really do. I think there's almost nothing that's not connected one way or another. And I can always find it with Kundalini. So thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Aprylisa, for being willing to help me and help with the readings of this. As Gloria has said, this book is a collection of prose reflections on Kundalini. I feel that it is probably the only one of its kind that is available. There are lots of books on Kundalini. If you put in that word on Google today, literally tens of thousands of sites come up. Now what? Where do you start? How do you begin? How do you know the real ones from the phonies? Well, in my time, and my experience started in 1981. Remember what the world was like in 1981. That has been a long time ago. Some of you probably weren't even born yet. You probably were just a twinkle in your daddy's eye. But at that time, I can tell you, there was not a Kundalini yoga studio on every corner, the way it seems like it is today. There was not a yoga studio on every corner. In fact, most of us living then, in my circle, we didn't quite know what these things were. We had heard of Kundalini, but we had no real idea what Kundalini might be. We knew there was such a thing about yoga, called yoga, but it was very mysterious. And I knew one woman who was rumored to do yoga, whatever that was. I knew another woman who was a vegetarian, and that was pretty far out too. So it was, believe me, a different world. No computers, no internet, because there were no computers. So you couldn't just run to your computer and look up a word and find out more than you wanted to know about it. It was very, very different. Now, many of us were involved in one or another kind of what we might call psychic investigation. You know, the Seth books came out about that time, and the Carlos Castaneda books came out around that time, and people were doing, some of them were fooling around with Ouija boards, and there was a certain interest in the psychic world, but nothing like we have today, believe me. So in 1989, and I'm going to say this too, some of you know my story. You can practically give it yourself because you've heard it before. But I want to give a little context for what's going to come. what we're really going to be talking about. What we're really going to get to is not my story, but your story, your thoughts, our conceptions, our investigations. But first, I need to say a little something about what happened to me in Wichita, Kansas, if you can believe it, in 1981. I didn't know anything about Kundalini. I'd never meditated, nor did I know anybody who did. I didn't know how to do yoga. And I said, I heard of this one woman, but that's all there just weren't things available like they are today. But I was kind of interested in Kundalini. I thought it was kind of fascinating. And the fact of the matter is I had tried to bring it up once many, many, many years before when I was reading a book by Alan Watts and he mentioned Kundalini. And I thought, aha, I wonder if I could do this. So I tried to awaken the inner energies. Well, what happened was I began to feel something very nice in the lower chakras. And I immediately thought, oh dear, I'm not pure enough for this. I better not try this. And I quit right then and there. And I didn't try again for 20 or 30 years. But this time around, I did try. And it was, I won't go into too much detail, but it was what you might call a perfect storm of Kundalini awakening. It was like somebody had planned it all out. And there were many aspects, such as I was in a crisis in my personal relationship. The relationship for many years seemed to be falling apart, and I was devastated. But that was a good thing in terms of Kundalini awakening, because often it happens when we are in crisis, whether it's personal, whether it's physical, or it's whatever it is. As one writer said, it prepares a space, an opening for something else to come in. Well, I certainly had the opening. I was reading this book, which wasn't about Kundalini at all. It was written by a Western scholar. It was about aspects of world mythology, but he had 2 pages on Kundalini. And those pages fascinated me. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if I can do that. I don't know. And there was also a tantric aspect that happened. So, much to my surprise, I call it the accidental tantric. I didn't mean to be a tantric, but the way things fell out, I was at that moment. Okay, 1981, reading this book, all these things were happening. I think I can bring those energies up, said I. You're not supposed to be able to do it that way. In the old times in India, in those areas, the yogis would practice for years to get ready for Kundalini. They wanted to purify their bodies, and they went through terrible austerities. At least to me, it sounds terrible. And they had their guru. And you're not supposed to do this unless you have a qualified teacher. Well, let me ask you this. Where am I going to find a qualified teacher in the middle of Kansas in 1981, surrounded by a society, most of whom have never even heard of Kundalini? There was no qualified teacher out there. But as it turned out, there was a qualified teacher. But that teacher was right in here. And that teacher grabbed me. It was like, maybe there was more than one teacher. I don't know. But the way it felt was, okay, she's ready. We've got her. Let's take her now. And they did. And the rest is history, at least my history. What happened was unbelievable as it sounds even today, and it astonishes me. I did my best to breathe as deeply as I could and raise the energies in what I now know were the lower chakras. I didn't have a word for these things in those days. And so I felt the sweet energies of the lower chakras. And then I said, okay, I've got this. Now, how do I get those up? I've got to concentrate. I've got to breathe real deep and concentrate and concentrate and concentrate. And I did for a very few minutes. And within those very few minutes, that energy literally shot up from my lower chakras into my head. And my head opened in ecstasy. Again, I didn't have words for what was going on. I knew that something absolutely wonderful and delightful was going on inside my head. And then I remembered that in the ancient tradition, it is said that at the end of the journey, the head might open like a lotus opening, petal by petal by petal. And I thought, yes, that's how it feels. It feels like a flower opening in my head. What was really going on was that there were energetic pulsations in my head. Pulsation, pulsation, pulsation. And it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. But after a few minutes of that, I don't know how many, probably maybe 5 or 6, it occurred to me, I don't know what I'm doing. Is this safe? Should I be doing this? I better get these energies down. And so I did. I brought them down. And that was episode 1 of what turned out to be many, many, many similar experiences for years and years and years after that. But I didn't know that was going to happen. And there was one other thing about that awakening experience. And that thing is that there was perception that came to me, and a realization. And that realization was, I don't think I really exist. I think that what exists is this great forceful field of energy, this sea of love. That is real. And I am a teeny weeny part of that, the way a drop is part of the ocean. And that gave me something to think about for a long time. Now, I know that many people who go through awakening have that realization, and they get very upset. They don't want to be told that they don't exist. They want to exist. Of course we exist. We have physical bodies. We have our life experiences. We have all of that. That doesn't go away. But in the largest sense, in the larger sense, at least the realization that I was given, and many people have been given this same realization, was I don't really exist. I'm just this drop in this great sea of love. Well, that was day 1. Day 2, I tried it again. And by golly, it happened again, much to my surprise. Now, these awarenesses and these feelings of ecstasy, which I didn't have a name for at that time, were overpowering. They were tremendous. They were like a flood of energy that changed my life literally forever. I love Catherine Ann Porter's phrase in another context. She wasn't writing about Kundalini, but she was talking about something else. And she said, spoke of the moment that changes everything. And I think we all have these moments in our lives, one way or another. Something big happens, something huge. And after that, your world is never the same. You are never the same. Everything is changed. Now, remember, I knew only one person who'd ever even heard of Kundalini. And I happened to know her. She knew about Kundalini because she had actually been to India. She had studied with the famous rascal guru, now known as Osho, then known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. But Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh had a lot of wisdom for all his character flaws. He had lots of wisdom. And so she had been in that ashram. She knew about ecstasy. So I talked to her and I told her what was happening to me. And she said to me, "You have experienced ecstasy." And I was thrilled. I was so thrilled because now I had a word for it. Before, I didn't even know what the word was, what had happened to me. I didn't know anybody who had had ecstasy. Did you in 1981? I don't think so. But anyway, she gave me the word that I needed. And as I said, that was truly a life-changing event. Now, oddly enough, when I saw her another time a couple of months later and I mentioned this episode, she looked at me and she said, "Oh, are you still thinking about that?" Well, yes, I was. I went into a totally altered state alone in my living room on this elm-lined street in Wichita, Kansas. And I went through what I could only think of as an inner initiation. I didn't know how to do any of this, but I was directed, I was told different things to do, and I did them. The book that I had been reading mentioned that in Tibetan yoga, when the student is initiated, that student must hold a bell and a vajra. What was the vajra and where was I going to get one in Kansas? But you know what? I looked around in my house and I found a vajra. Now, not the kind you see in pictures, those beautiful metal big things. Mine was made of glass, but it was what a vajra is, which is a barbell with on each end. It has this bud, and it was, I don't know where I got it or why, but it was like a barbell. So I held that in one hand. And the other thing you're supposed to have is a bell. Well, in the Tibetan yoga tradition, Tibetan Buddhism, using those wonderful big bells that they hold, and that's the bell you're supposed to hold. Well, I certainly didn't have anything like that. But I thought, oh, well, a bell is a bell. My mother used to collect bells. I found a little bitty bell about this big. And I said, oh, well, a bell is a bell. So that was my bell. My glass vajra was my vajra, and I held those in my hands as I went through a series of inner knowings and directions and initiations. Now, I did other things, almost by intuition. I sometimes walked with the bell and the vajra, but I was in a state of total rapturous, ecstatic bliss. Every step I took was blissful. Every breath I took was blissful. I was in a state I couldn't possibly duplicate, or maybe I could, but anyway, that's not my normal state. Suddenly, now in the Tibetan Buddhist initiation, part of it that goes along with it is sort of a baptism with water. Well, I wasn't going to baptize myself with water, but it seemed like taking showers suddenly became very important. Purification became very important. And I did other things. And I started writing all this down because although I didn't have a teacher, I didn't even have a friend to say, this is what is happening to me. Now, when you have a big experience, one of the things you long for is somebody to share with, to say, guess what happened to me today? But I didn't have anybody like that. I didn't have any friend I could talk with. So I just did it on my own. I did an initiation on my own. And later I read about Buddhism and discovered that what I had done almost followed, not exactly, but almost what is called the first level Buddhist initiation. There are certain steps that are followed, and by intuition, I was able to follow almost all of those steps. So that is how I got started in 1981 in Wichita, Kansas. But as I said, many think that that's the end of the journey, that you practice for years and you strive for years and you purify and you meditate and you do this and you do that. But that wasn't the end of my journey. That was the beginning of my journey. So then what happened? I'm going to have to look and see. Well, this awakening was not exactly, in terms of the energetic, was not quite like what you usually hear. When you hear about Kundalini, you usually are told that it starts in the base of the spine, the energies, and then they work their way up through the chakras. I couldn't pronounce that word. I didn't know what it meant. And then finally it would reach your head. Well, mine was very different. It didn't go up the spine to the head. It was very diffuse. It was in the head, but it was all over my body. It was everywhere. And that's the way it continued over the years. I didn't try to direct it or make it happen a certain way. I just let it happen. I followed it. I did not try to direct it and tell it what it was supposed to do. I figured it knew what it was supposed to do. So I opened totally and allowed myself to be infused by this very strange, very novel, but wonderful energy in the way that it wanted it to happen. Eventually, it happened that I could feel that everywhere in my body as the years went by. I don't think there's any pore, any opening, any tissue in my body that has not felt this energy, because it has always been diffused, diffused, diffused. Now, what has been interesting to me, because I've been both the recipient and the witness to this event. See, that's very different. In earlier times, most people just felt the experience, but they weren't really a witness, a separate witness, but I was. I noted what was happening. I wrote about it. I kept a journal. Because I thought, somehow, I think this is important. I think that what is happening to me may be a forerunner of something that may happen to a lot of people on this earth before it's over. But for the time being, I was alone. And for basically 15 years, I didn't have anybody to talk to about my experience. Now, I, looking back, would have to say, I'm not sure how I got through it. I really don't. That's an awful long time to be that alone and not have any confirmation or any help or any encouragement. I tried. After I was in Wichita, I stayed there for 7 more years. It was tough during the winter when I had to teach, because one thing Kundalini can do, it can mess up your head. You don't think quite as straight as you'd like to. And I was trying to be a teacher. And at times I was so confused I could hardly connect the end of the sentence to the beginning. So, but yeah, I got through it. So in 1988, I moved to San Francisco. And boy, that was a trip. Because, Wichita was not a small town, but it didn't have all these strange, confusing energies like a city does. I'd never lived in a city. And if you move to a city and you've never been in a city, what you discover, it's almost impossible to survive because all these energies from all these different groups and activities are coming at you from all these directions. And it can be very disturbing and very alarming. And I was pretty confused after I moved for a while. I finally got used to it. But for a while, I just couldn't even walk down the street in the mission without feeling assaulted, you might say, by all these many energies. But I finally got used to it, and I found friends in San Francisco. But it was all different. I thought when I moved to San Francisco, everybody would be a meditator and have a golden crown of energy coming out of their heads, you know, and so forth. But that wasn't the way it was at all. There were all kinds of people there. Everybody you could think of was there. And it was hard to get used to those energies, but I finally did. Well, my energies, as I said, came up very quickly within minutes. I do not know why. I know the circumstances. I've told you the circumstances, but why I would have that kind of experience, I don't know. I have met a few people who've had a somewhat similar experience. They don't know why either. But it does change your life totally. Since then, my life, my focus, my interest, my experience, everything has focused on Kundalini. I think it's the most fascinating thing in the world. I think it is behind all sorts of things you wouldn't guess. I think it's the impetus for everything that lives and maybe some things that are not alive. I think it's the creator of our world. And I think it's where we're all going. Now, in that time, things have really, really changed. The world is unfolding. I happen to believe that the world is evolving. I think we're all part of the process. And I think that we're all climbing the mountain together. And we're at different places on the mountain. I think Kundalini is behind all creativity. That's what I think. I started to write poetry seriously, but I tried to tell a couple of people in San Francisco what was going on. Maybe the first person actually was in Wichita. I think this was the guy who used to come out and drill us with certain sort of energy practices, walking, slow walking movement, and that sort of thing. I thought, well, he'll understand this. And I told him that I was having these ecstatic experiences. You know what he said? He said, if you're lucky, you'll get over this. Yeah. Well, I did try again for years when I was in San Francisco. And I told a wonderful Qigong teacher. And she was very knowledgeable. She was married to a master from China who could stand on cleavers, and he could stand on uncooked eggs and not break the shell. And they would go back to China every year and work as healers in a special hospital there. I thought, she will know. So I told her. And you know what she said? She said, no. Your energies can be hot or cold or like electricity. Nothing like you describe. It's not in the literature. Well, that was kind of a downer. So I didn't try for a while. And actually, it wasn't until Andrew Harvey came to San Francisco to teach, and I got to know him. And he, of course, knows about all these things, and he recognized what I was saying. And he started me writing poetry. And I did write poetry, and he said, you've got to write poetry. So I started writing, and actually I published several books. since that time. And then he and I have done several things on YouTube, and I have various things on YouTube if you want to know more about this. However, I want to talk now about Kundalini itself and not just my experience. And the question that always comes up is first, is what is Kundalini? And so I have written, that's one of the things I've written about in this book. And I'm going to ask my friend, dear Aprylisa, to read that section, answering the question, or as I answered it anyway, what is Kundalini? Aprylisa?
Thank you, Dorothy. From Kundalini Wonder, what is Kundalini? Of all human phenomena, Kundalini is one of the most mysterious and least understood. According to ancient yogic texts, Kundalini is a serpent resting at the base of the spine. When aroused, it ascends in spiral fashion through the various chakras of the body until it reaches the crown, where the energies unite with those of the immensity which sustains us all. At that moment, the small self loses itself in forgetfulness and regains its primal condition as part of the ever-flowing consciousness, which is the final reality. This, a state of unimaginable bliss, is known as enlightenment. Kundalini means coiled, for in Hindu symbology, the snake is coiled 2.5 times in its resting place. Each chakra is an energy center or a wheel which presumably begins to spin as the energy passes through. On each side of the spinal column is a major channel for ascent, one known as Ida, the other as Pingala. These form a helix around the central channel, the Sushumna, a tiny thread rising from the base to the very top of the spinal column. Many devout students of yoga devote their lives to perfecting the technique of awakening and then lifting the Kundalini energies. To this end, they adhere to the strict yogic discipline, including the practice of asanas or positions, a restricted diet, and performance of austere purification rituals. Only the very pure in body and spirit are deemed fit to follow this path with impunity. Those less prepared expose themselves to dangers of every sort, from physical illness to emotional imbalance. Because of the difficulties inherent in the practice, the student is cautioned to proceed only under the guidance of an experienced teacher. Once the technique is mastered, the student is said to be gifted with many supernatural powers, such as the ability to see or hear at a distance, to travel out of body, and to charm without effort. Kundalini has also played a prominent role in many cultures where it has been a key element in spiritual practice. Kundalini, under various names, has been identified as central to such spiritual traditions as the esoteric practice of early Egypt, Taoism, and yoga in Asia, and shamanism throughout the world. Some feel that even the ecstatic states reported in mystic Christianity reflect the workings of Kundalini. Kundalini, by whatever name, is universally treasured as a sacred experience and venerated as a means of passage to other worldly realms. In contemporary thought, Kundalini is widely viewed as the essential electromagnetic psychospiritual system which undergirds and sustains all of the operations of the self, from physical to mental to emotional. This guiding force generally operates below the level of consciousness, keeping the body in balance and performing in normal fashion. However, spontaneous Kundalini experience, even full awakening, can occur. Unexpected arousal is being reported more and more frequently across the globe. In the majority of cases, this awakening is imbued with a deeply spiritual cast. It generally begets in the subject a response of humility and awe. the seeker is now able to experience states far transcending anything known before. It is if she now thinks and feels at the cellular level with a capacity for knowing deeper and swifter than any perception achieved through the familiar rational mind. She may now be vulnerable to states of both ecstasy and pain beyond any previously imagined. Some may develop rare healing powers or acute mental abilities. In its perfect manifestation, Kundalini purges the self of all its latent illness and psychological perturbation, leaving a being empowered to express her fullest potential. Gopi Krishna maintained that Kundalini would be the engine for the evolutionary transformation of humanity. Those who experience its high bliss and overwhelming sense of connectedness to divine purpose and direction, they concur. Whatever else it does, Kundalini permanently changes the nervous system, making it capable of states of awareness well beyond the familiar spectrum. These changes lead to a swift, not merely in what we see, but in how we see. And the threshold is lowered by both pleasure and pain. The defenses are stripped away. One experiences the interconnectedness of all beings and levels in the most personal and intimate sense. One resonates at the deepest centers with this newfound knowledge. Kundalini opens the system to infusions of the divine. One is held by unmitigated, unimaginable, pure love. And this love is the sustaining force of the cosmos itself.
Yes. Yes to all of that. It's big. It's overwhelming. And it does have its challenges. There's no question about it. I don't know anybody who went through this without some challenges on the way. I had challenges. They weren't as great as some people have, but it's like it went through the body. And everywhere there was a block, it would make you aware of that block. I don't care what the block was, whether it was an emotion, a psychological state, or a physical. You will have to deal with it. It's right in your face. You can't not deal with it. So, it isn't as if the energy shoots up and then you're in ecstasy every minute of your life from then on. It's not that way. It's like life. Life takes you up and takes you down, takes you up and takes you down. And that's the way the Kundalini worked for me. There would be a challenge, a physical problem maybe. And I'd get through that. And I'd think, aha, I made it. I'm never be sick again. And then guess what? Another one would happen. And it'd be another kind of thing. For me, there were a lot of gastrointestinal issues because, as my doctor said, the gut is the first to react to whatever. So your system is all, irritated and confused. Sometimes it was eye issues. Kundalini is notorious for putting pressure on your eyes. It did for me. I never knew if it was Kundalini or allergies. In fact, I finally had a friend I could talk with on the phone, and we used to say, is it energy or allergies? We don't know, because she was having the same kind of thing. So anyway, I think it's well worth it. I am so grateful that I have been allowed to participate in this mysterious process that's still happening. And of course, what is Kundalini? Above all, it is the life force itself. If we don't even go beyond that, that's a lot. And it's in every single one of us at the subconscious level. We've all got it. If you're alive, you've got it. Kundalini awakening is when that subconscious activity comes into your conscious mind. You now become aware, for better or for worse, of what is going on. So that's about as far as we can go with what is Kundalini, because ultimately I think it's a mystery. It's a divine mystery. Somebody, when I finally had a friend I could talk to in Wichita and told her my story, she said, this is like a cosmic joke. Because, Wichita, Kansas, this Kundalini, what do you say? So, but it's not a cosmic joke, but it's a cosmic force, and it's in all of us all the time. But we're more aware of it some of the time than others. I'll talk later a bit about some of the other changes, some of the gifts. I think we're all given gifts as we go through this. I don't know what your gift is, but my gift, I'll talk more about some of the gifts that came to me as a result of this. Now, I want to talk a bit about how Kundalini is very much like a near-death experience. Near-death is one of the most powerful experiences that anyone can have. They will all tell you, anybody who's been through that, it is, first of all, a total transformation of life, of perspective, of knowing, of feeling, and in many, many, many ways, it is like Kundalini itself. In fact, I've heard always that near-death groups welcome people who've had Kundalini awakening. Why? Because these two experiences have so much in common. I'm going to ask Aprylisa again to read an excerpt from this book on the parallels between Kundalini and the near-death experience.
From Kundalini Wonder, more on Kundalini and the near-death experiences. Last night I attended a fascinating panel by persons who had gone through a near-death experience. Once more, I was struck by the resemblance between NDEs and Kundalini awakening. Here are some of their common features, often noted by other writers as well. Number 1, each is a life-changing event. It was what Catherine Ann Porter called, in another context, the moment that changes everything. Once such profound encounters occur, one is changed forever and there is no going back to the earlier stage. Number 2, both result in states of overwhelming love. Those who travel to the other side are so enraptured by their new sense of indescribable bliss that they feel that they are embraced by the vast and loving forces of the universe, even by God himself, itself. Likewise, Kundalini, when it is in the proper alignment, may result in absolute ecstasy akin to that of Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint John of the Cross. This condition of utter bliss is not a thought, but a somatic experience at the cellular level. Number 3, both find in this new state that feelings of depression or self-rejection simply disappear. For surely one cannot be sad in the face of such overwhelming love. Atheists become believers. Doubters are convinced. The divine is real and courses through the body as the beloved within. Number 4, both have great difficulty in returning to the world where materialistic values and petty concerns are the norm. They are now walking in the two worlds, for they've been granted a vision of a reality that others do not know exists. Number 5, both are often reluctant to share this mysterious and intimate adventures with others, for it seems like a betrayal of that which is profoundly sacred. Ultimately, they may come forth and speak as a gift to the world to help understand this still unfamiliar experience. Number 6, both now often have a sense of mission or purpose and seek a means of giving back the gift in which whatever way is best suited to their capacities. They may go into healing professions or turn to artistic expressions or writing. Service, rather than personal gain, is now their motivating factor. 7. Both experience great love and a sense of oneness with all others. They literally feel, I am you, and if I look in the mirror, it might be your face I see. The world itself may appear in radiant beauty, transformed into a garden of mystic delight. Everything, even the trash in the street, may be luminous. They may know at the deepest level that everything and every being in the universe is connected as part of the one great whole, as part of the single fabric of the cosmos with love at the center of it all. Number 8. They may be quite lonely in their journey, for others may be disbelieving or openly disapproving when they attempt to describe their encounters. Family and friends may think they are mentally disturbed and need psychological help. Mates may feel betrayed and see this new element as a disrupting element in their relationship. Indeed, they may have no one to confide in, no one to support them as they struggle to integrate this dimension of awareness into their life. Both NDEers and Kundalini awakened ones may now be filled with the deep realization that each of us is a fiction, a story that we ourselves have created, for we do not exist except in particles in this great glory of the divine source. Number 9. Each experience is unique to the person. Each one undergoes a pattern of responses relevant to the particular nature and life experiences. Yet there are common threads among all of these. Number 10. Universal awareness of both the NDE and the Kundalini process is becoming more widespread, in part because of media access and also because, I think, more such events are actually happening in the field as the field expands, especially those involving spontaneous Kundalini awakenings. Number 11. Both phenomena are, I believe, parts of the ongoing process of evolution of consciousness now going on worldwide. Both propel us forward as humanity transforms into a new kind of being, indeed, perhaps a new species. Number 12. One of the dominant features of an NDE is the immersion into a sea of love at the other side. Kundalini itself often produces a similar feeling of ecstatic joy. Some authorities state that at the moment of death, the Kundalini energies are released, and thus one may exit into a state of pure rapture. Thus, Kundalini is in fact an integral part of the death process itself. The folks on the panel were each one a loving being, transformed into a messenger of the heart to help the planet move forward in our process of universal awakening into a new reality.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I mentioned that Kundalini can bring remarkable gifts. And we hear these stories from ancient times about the yogis who could do all kind of teleport and be in more than one place at once and do all sorts of magical things. I don't know any much about all that. I did not receive those gifts, nor did I expect to. But I did get some what is generally called expanded awareness. I want to mention just a few of my experiences, and when we get to the last part of this program, I want to have a long and a good discussion of what others have experienced along the way in terms of their expanded awareness. But right now, I'm still asking you to hold your questions till we get through talking here. Okay. For me, one of the most interesting aspects of gifts that I have received is, I guess you would say, being an empath. I have been able to experience all sorts of energies from all sorts of people and things that I would have not imagined possible. And I mean that like I often have experienced felt another person's energies. Whatever is going on in their body now becomes what is going on in my body. I don't always seek this. I felt it in strange settings, such as standing in line at the grocery store, and I'll look around and say, well, who's that? And try to figure out where that energy is coming from. Or maybe I'm just at a bus stop and I feel something, and I look around and there's somebody over here, and I know that that's their energy that I'm picking up. Sometimes I not only didn't expect it, I didn't really, it was almost like an intrusion. I know a couple of times what happened was I was with somebody's boyfriend, and we were, say, looking at something together, and then I'll pick up on their energy, which is actually quite nice, and I think, oh, that's why she likes him. He's got good energy. But I don't tell him. I don't tell him. That's a secret. Okay. Indeed, ecstasy has been my guide. I'll say that. I don't mean I have it every morning when I wake up. In fact, when I first started and didn't know what to do, we're talking about the first days here, I didn't know anything about meditation, but I knew that you could kind of focus on an image, and I did. I focused on two images, and one was beautiful Teresa of Avila, and that wonderful sculpture of her that's in Rome, and she is in ecstasy. And if you want to know what ecstasy looks like, go look at that statue. There's an angel there which is plunging his lance into her heart. And she's just like this. Bernini's statue. Or look it up online if you haven't seen it. But the other the other image that I saw in that book, and I focused on, was the famous Shiva Shakti, the god and goddess embracing. And so that gave me, I was quite interested in Shiva. So I thought, well, I'll just meditate on Shiva. And I did, and boy, was that powerful. Shiva is very powerful, and you better be prepared if you get the Shiva energies coming into your body. Because, of course, at that time, I was wide open and primed, and it was just too much for me. I thought, I don't think I'm ready for these energies. Isn't there something less intense that I could do? And so my prayer was answered. I was led to concentrate on Krishna rather than Shiva. Krishna is much softer, gentler, easier. And so I, for a long time, focused on Krishna. One of the things that I think is given to us often is enhanced creativity. And whatever your field is, whatever your creative outlet is, it may get be more frequent, more intense, and also more often. And I started writing poetry because Andrew Harvey told me I had to write poetry. So I did. And oddly enough, as I've gotten older, instead of writing less, I write more. And they still keep coming. I'm getting together a new book of poetry, but it's hard to get it together because I keep writing more poems. Actually, all that was predicted by a psychic years and years ago. He said, when you reach a certain stage, you can write all the poems that you want. You can write any kind of poetry that you want. This is going to happen to you. I thought, oh, don't be silly. Well, here I am in my 90s still writing more poems. So I guess he was right. But there are people waking up, being more creative, fulfilling their mission. We know that's happening all over the world. And one indication of that is the new children. And I suspect everybody is familiar to some extent with these remarkable children who are appearing in our world. They come in knowing things that it took us all our lifetimes to learn. They already know this. They already say things that we have a hard time knowing why they would say that. Here's a story. One of my friends, who shall be nameless, had a little girl about 8 years old. And one night as her mother was putting her to bed, this little girl said, "God is love." Well, this little girl went to school, but she didn't go to a religious school. She went to a secular school. And her mother thought, why is she saying that? They don't teach that at that school. So she asked her child, well, where'd you learn that? And her little girl said, oh, I learned that at school. And her mother said, well, they don't teach that at school, do they? And she said, well, not that school. I mean my other school. I said, what do you mean your other school? Well, every night after you put me to bed, they come and I go to another school and they give me things to know from this other school. Well, all right. That's one of the new children. And that's how some of the new children, at least, are being shaped. This phenomenon, this expansion of awareness, these new gifts for children and adults, this is happening all over the world. And I can't say for sure that it's happening more, or is it just being reported more? I think it's happening more. And I don't travel the world, but those who do tell me that's right, that things are going on all over the world to all kinds of people. I received recently the most wonderful description of what an awakening can do for you. And I put it on my blog and my Facebook both. And if you want to read it, it's, I think, wonderful. And this is a fellow who said that he was an agnostic. He was a real estate agent or lawyer or something like that. Very left brain, very convinced that there really was nothing there. This was all just, la stuff. And then he woke up. And it's a wonderful description of what it's like to awaken. And I don't know if he had help going through or not, but I recommend that to you. As I said, if you can access my blog, which the blog is Kundalini Splendor.blogspot.com, or I'm on Facebook. It's on my Facebook, and that's just my name. So there's a wonderful description of what this is like in a more compressed form. Now, we know that something is happening. We don't know exactly what it is or why it's happening or who's behind it. But I'll guess that everybody here believes something is going on. Sometimes it's called the shift. Sometimes it's called awakening. Sometimes it's called transfiguration. Sometimes it's called transformation. And sometimes some people are calling it actual mutation. Now that's a big word. What is a mutation? Well, tadpoles do mutate into frogs. And caterpillars do mutate into butterflies, and they still don't quite understand how. It's very mysterious, but they do it. They change literally from one form into another. Are we mutating? Are we literally changing our form? Are we becoming the new human? Well, we're developing all of these expanded awareness things, attributes. Where's that taking us? I think, again, this is just my personal belief, I think we are changing into light beings. I think we're getting glimpses We're not there yet. Maybe some people are, I don't know. But we're getting glimpses, what I think of as glimpses, as tastes of what it could be like to be light beings, which means we're not going to have a physical form. I don't know how long it's going to take. It may take a while. But something is happening, and it's changing us into what I think of as a better version of ourselves. Now, humanity has had, we as human society, actually have tried this many times in our history. If you go way back, you learn that if you study the Kabbalah, for example, and probably some of you have, one point of Kabbalah was to develop a perfect human. And the name of that human was Adam Kadmon. And if you went through the stages, went through all this and studied and so forth, presumably the end result would be a perfect human by the name of Adam Kadmon. And of course, that was all very secret, because then as it is now, people will think you were nuts. When you get to the Middle Ages, think of the alchemists. What were they doing? They said publicly, we are trying to turn base metal. That means anything that was not gold. We're trying to turn things that are not gold into gold. But actually what they were trying to do was perfect the human being. Now, the reason they didn't want that out in public was because probably they would have been persecuted and jailed or something if the authorities had known what they were up to. So they didn't explain that they were trying to create a perfect human being. They explained for public knowledge that they were trying to change one form of metal into another, and they got by with that. And those were the alchemists, very secret. Then there was Kabir. You know, Kabir, the wonderful poet of many centuries ago in India. He said in his prayers, turn me to gold. And he's written some wonderful poems. But he said, turn me, speaking to God, turn me to gold. And what he meant was make me a perfect human being. Turn me to gold. Andrew Harvey's written a book. He's translated over 100 of Kabir's poems, and he named his book, Turn Me to Gold, because Kabir was fascinating. He was actually quite poor. His daddy was a weaver. He was a weaver. There wasn't any internet. He didn't have a newspaper. So he just would go out in the street and he would say his poems out loud in the middle of the street. But his poems got preserved, and they are quite wonderful. And then more recently, there was Teilhard de Chardin, and he called it the Omega point because he felt that we were in a stage of human evolution, and that at the Omega point, when we would arrive, then the earthly and these other earthly, heaven, would meet at the Omega point, and we would be one with the divine reality. And then there's Sri Aurobindo, who was the founder of Auroville. And he felt, too, that we were going through transformation to a form of our species quite beyond he and the mother, his spiritual wife. All of these talked about transformation that would go on cell by cell, molecule by molecule. And that's what we're feeling now as we have these awakening experiences. We're literally feeling it within. And it's like it's going on cell by cell, molecule by molecule. But these are new frequencies that are coming in. And we have to find a way to assimilate the frequencies. And that's part of why this transition can be so difficult. You know, you can't just say, okay, here I am, God, make me at this high frequency. Doesn't happen that way. It goes bit by bit. And I think the process is one of open up, new frequencies come in, and then we have to have time to assimilate them, to integrate them into our present system. And it can be quite difficult. And everyone has, that's one basic thing to know. We all have a different experience. Somebody said, oh, I don't want to read your book. I want to know what's going to happen to me. And I just thought, don't worry, my friend. Don't worry. We all have our own experience according to our own nature, our own sensibility, our own makeup, our own bodies. So everyone is different. So many think that a new human is being born. I think that. I think we're in evolution of consciousness. I've had enough evidence after my life. I can believe anything. I say, if this can happen to me in the middle of Kansas, when it did, anything can happen to anybody, anywhere, anytime. I'm a believer. So this book, Kundalini Wonder, is sort of the distillation, and it's sort of the constellation of any wisdom that I might have learned on my journey. I hope that it will be helpful to others on their journey. At least you'll know that you're not alone. Many people say that. I belong to a wonderful little group, healing meditation here, and one member of that group said just the other day, he said, I'm so glad to find this group. He said, I've been alone in my journey for 5 years. And I thought, well, yeah, it's hard. It's hard if you don't have anyone. So again, when I wrote Unmasking the Rose, and by that I was thinking of Rose as the great archetypal figure of spirituality. And unmasking simply means going into the heart of it, really find out what that is. People said, this is not my journey, but it's enough like my journey to be useful to me. I'm glad to know about this. So our journeys are similar, but I don't think that they are ever the same. People often say, it's often been said now, that matter is simply frozen energy, that whatever is beyond matter is energy. And we know that. And as many have said that, Tesla said it, Einstein said it, all the great thinkers, physicists and so forth, reached that point. Now, I want to tell you a couple of things. I want to tell you that ecstasy never stops. I said, I don't feel ecstasy every morning when I get it. In fact, sometimes I think I'm getting arthritis. I get so stiff I can hardly get up. But on the whole, I think I've done better than I would have if I had not had this experience. I think it transfigures you energetically and physically. It doesn't make you perfect, but it makes you a lot better than you were. And I had an ecstasy experience recently, which started with music, because music is a great trigger for me. I think I wrote about it, maybe you've already read it. I happened to be listening to some music. I'd gotten up, I hadn't even eaten yet. I was listening to some music, and it was Baroque music, and it was beautiful. And before I knew it, I was going into an ecstatic state. Now, for me, that ecstasy has changed through the years. It's like it goes into a higher and higher and higher vibration. That's all I can say. And it's gotten subtler and gentler and higher over the years. And now it happens sometimes. And this did happen the other day. As I've gotten older, I can't do floor yoga. I can't do much of any kind of yoga. I'm doing well to walk around the block. But they made provision for that. The more difficult the physical part has become for me, the less I've been required to do. And now sometimes all I'm required to do is this, move my fingers like that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's almost imperceptible. I just move my fingers and the ecstatic energies flow throughout my body. And it's been fascinating to watch that process transform over the years. But I have some late news. And this is where I am in my journey now. I have found out, much to my surprise, that there is, in fact, something beyond ecstasy. I figured that was the goal, and we were all trying to get there. And then we were connected to the divine, and that was it. But I had an experience that did not involve any kind of ecstasy, physical feeling. And it's impossible to describe. I love that word, ineffable. I don't know if you know it, but it's wonderful. It means you can't describe it in words. And the best experiences, of course, you can't describe in words. You have to experience it. Well, this was ineffable, but I did give it a try. You can't describe these experiences in words, but that has not stopped me from trying. And I've tried many times. I don't remember now quite what triggered this, but what I do remember was the experience. It was not ecstasy. I guess I would have to call it a sense of presence. I didn't see anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything. But I had a sense that I was in the presence of the holiest thing that I could ever hope to imagine. It was something that was so sacred, so beautiful, so amazing. I could sort of describe it generally, but there was no way that I could convey the sanctity of that experience. And I was very grateful. So I'm going to quit talking at this point. I'm going to open this up for our questions and answers and our discussion. You're welcome to ask me or Aprylisa anything you want to. I didn't ask her permission beforehand to say that, but I'm sure she'll agree. You can ask questions, or we can have, if you want to, I don't mind if we talk back and forth, if you talk to one another, because I'd like for this to be a group experience as much as possible. And what I would love to hear, maybe we could start with this. I know many of you have had expansive experiences. You've had mysterious experiences. You've had mind-blowing experiences. So if anybody would be willing to share some of those, I would be grateful. And don't all speak at once.
Remember that when you ask a question, you need to unmute so that we can hear you. It might be helpful to raise your hand if you have a question, because there's a lot of you. And if I don't see you, then you can use the chat box and type it in there. But, you know, let's just try to be spontaneous. But if it gets a little like too many people talking at once, then we'll you know, raise our hand or type it into the chat box and I'll read it out. Okay?
Right.
Aprylisa says, raise your hand icon under reaction on your dashboard. Yeah, I actually don't have that. Oh, yeah, I guess I do. Yeah, I do. So, yeah, if you see a button that says reactions, you can just raise your hand that way, or you can just do it this way. It doesn't matter. Okay, so anybody? Don't forget to unmute so we can hear you.
There's your chance.
Maybe I'll interject
As a library of interesting experiences.
Dorothy, maybe I'll interject something before we go to the first question. That story about the little girl, that was the story I told you about my daughter.
I know. I didn't want to. I didn't know if I should say that or not. I think it's really interesting that was your daughter.
And what she said was, she said, it's a special school, and when I go to sleep, and it's in my heart, she said, and when I go to sleep, I go there, and God tells me things.
Oh my, that's so
and
beautiful.
What I told her was,
and also we could add all the stories that children are reporting now about their past lives.
Yes.
You know? And this used to be something that was mostly happening in India. And what was his name? Ian Stevenson went over there and got thousands of cases. Yes. But it's right here among us now. And there was even for a while, a TV program about children and their past life memories. And they can check this out. And it's amazing that right down to the finest detail, these children are, that's when they're very young. And they lose that capacity often when they get a little older.
By the time they're 7 or 8, it's usually gone. The memory is usually gone.
What did you say?
By the time they're 7 or 8 years old, the memory is usually gone.
7? How? 7?
7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, it usually goes away by 7 or 8. Before that, many of them can remember a past life, and they've even had cases where they've been able to find their former parents and identify them and all that.
And there are cases where a child is born with birthmarks corresponding to how they died.
That's true.
We've had presentations from Jim Tucker, and who succeeded. He worked with Stevenson for many years, and then he took over the research after Stevenson retired. And also Carol Bowman recently gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
There's another mystery. And one possibility for all of us, I guess, why are you born with certain capacities? And in my case, it would be why were you there with, you had all this Kundalini awareness. I mean, I could just do it when it happened. It was unfamiliar and very familiar all at the same time. Why? Why me? And one possibility is that there was an ancestor or relative. One possibility is that you bring what some call the subtle body in. Your subtle body, your soul body, your spirit body. You don't bring your physical necessarily, but you bring your soul body in, and then you just kind of have whatever capacity you had before. I don't know. I'd like to meet that.
I think most likely, I would say you had been doing, all the preparation and purification you were talking about, that different traditions have in place before you expect to have a Kundalini experience. You probably did that in a previous life. You probably did all of that, and you picked up where you left off. It's just like, it's just like any other, like musicians who are like someone like Mozart, or, who are prodigies in their own right, even as children, we pick up where we left off by the time we're about 21.
And I think that's an explanation, and it's not one I've got. If it's not that, I do not know. I just don't know.
I think Jackie had a question. Jackie?
Yes, I was going to just mention, from what I understand of Dorothy's experience, she did look at images, sacred images, but she did not concentrate on Sanskrit vowels or Sanskrit words to activate the Kundalini. So that would be something for all of us around the world, that these experiences are ineffable and they transcend all linguistic barriers, so that we don't have to have Sanskrit or Latin or a particular language in order to receive a sacred activation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I might just add, Jackie and Gloria, although I didn't know anything about Sanskrit at that time, sometime later, years later, I was at a workshop, and for the first time I heard Sanskrit sung and spoken, and I was so filled with ecstasy, I almost fell off my chair. It was fabulous. Now, on the other hand, the first time I saw Sanskrit writing, nothing. Nothing. It didn't. And so I concluded that whoever that predecessor was must have been somebody who spoke Sanskrit but did not read it. I suspect that would be true. And I still have been able to learn Sanskrit. I've tried. I didn't do very well to write it.
Anyone else? Yes, Yana?
Can I introduce you?
Sure.
Well, Yana is a very special friend, and we are very blessed to have her here. She she has lived in the Bay Area for many years, but she now lives in Nepal. And she just happens to be in this country because she got caught in the quarantine. She was over here visiting, and I guess it was when, March?
Oh, January.
In January.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she got caught here. And so instead of going back to Nepal, she's still living. She's living with friends in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I can't go back yet. They won't let anybody in Nepal or out of here.
How did you meet?
How did we meet?
How did we meet?
I don't really remember exactly. I think we just
Somehow through the internet, I think.
Yeah, something I don't really recall.
I haven't been in Nepal lately, I know that.
No. But I wanted to mention, so I had a unique experience, and I'm still trying to figure out what it's all about. In 1992, just like a light switch, I didn't used to dream that much, was the ordinary dreams. And then all of a sudden, I started getting ecstatic dreams. And it went on for about 13 years.
Wow.
And it had a completely different quality than a dream. It was more like a visions, night visions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to experience all different tastes and qualities of ecstasy through communing with different animals. You know, just I would wake up in my dream and I would be leaning against a snake and just examining the scales of the snake and the war. I mean, just you know, it was such a tactile experience. And then I started getting teachers, and the recurring teachers, and they would tell me things, or they would come inside of my body and start working, doing different things. I would always wake up and think, I would never even be able to think of that as a story. I always found it so fascinating. But they were such gifts that I did write everyone down because I felt it was it was really a gift of grace. It was very powerful. And I'm still kind of, I did write a book about it.
Yeah, you did.
For my dissertation, I used that.
What was the name of your dissertation?
Guardians of the Gate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, an investigation of numinous presence or visions of the divine in dreams.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
Is that book available?
Yeah. It's by an academic press, so it's kind of a little expensive, but it's available on Amazon.
It is on Amazon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And your full name is?
Yana Castle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I read that book. It's wonderful.
Actually under Yana Womack, because that's when my name was Yana Womack. But I'm still trying to work with that energy because it did change. I would wake up in light. Light was different. Sometimes I would have to walk around. I'd have a lot of shamans, and it was always in the east. These dreams were always in India or Nepal. So it was like a parallel reality, I kind of figured. I was kind of living there and having these experiences, yet living in California. So I think about it and write about it.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
I wish that I had somebody like Dorothy was saying. I find it frustrating because I haven't heard about anybody else who's had these experiences, and I'd love to talk to somebody who has.
There are people. One of the things I teach is dream work, but I also teach spiritist thought. And in spiritist thought, in the spiritist literature, when we sleep, our spirit can travel and does travel. And often it just travels through the astral realms, and we have, what we remember as a dream, and it might be an emotional experience of this or that. But in your case, in that kind of dream, if you want to call it, I think it's more than a dream. You're going to higher levels, not just the astral plane. I've had dreams like that where I've met teachers who have passed, spiritual teachers. And sometimes I feel like I've been downloading all night, but when I wake up, I remember the teacher, and I remember being in their presence, and I remember them teaching me all these things, but I don't remember what they were.
Oh.
And I think that what happens in a case like that is you are taking in maybe new information, right?
Yeah.
But as Jeremy Taylor, whom I studied with, dream would have said, it's the information is not yet speech ripe. So,
I like that.
Say it again.
In other words, we don't have the words for it. It's new stuff, and we don't have language for it, as Dorothy was saying earlier. There's just so much in these higher experiences that we can't describe because we don't have the language for it. And what a blessing to have so many,
Yeah, it was about 3 a week for about 13 years. It's quite a few. But I would get, sometimes I get this one dream where I had this voice. I had this special healing voice that nobody has it's not like it's available. Nobody knows how to do that now. In ancient times, they were able to do that. And so I was able to do that. And I could hear this in my dream, and I was healing people. So it was a lot of different circumstances. But and then I was able to remember maybe 5 dreams a night. And they would be sometimes nested dreams, like dreams. And so my recall, I would even be surprised myself when I'd be writing it down first thing that, and then this was the second dream. This is the fifth, like it would just kept going on and on. sometimes they were a little related, but it was just, well, I'm glad I wrote everything down. And now I have them here. See, I didn't have my big tome of this, you know, my notebooks of my dreams with me. And now I'm here with my dreams in quarantine. So
Oh, wow.
read them all again.
Thank you for sharing that. Someone else?
I have a question.
Yes, Stephanie.
Hi,
Can't
Dorothy.
really
How are you?
you can't see you. There's a blur in front of you.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
having issues with my camera.
I
I
see.
grew up in Wichita.
Oh, well, you would appreciate my story.
Yes, because I know exactly how it is. And I left there in 1986. And as a matter of fact, I had a near-death experience at Wesley Hospital
Oh, really?
in 1983. So what you're describing is exactly what I've experienced over the years. Very profound. And I didn't talk about my near-death experience for years because, you know, Kansas is kind of backwards in a lot of ways. And, you know, so there weren't really a lot of people to talk to about metaphysical issues.
That's correct. But that didn't keep them from happening.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. How? Hi. I seldom meet anybody from. People always like to say to me, now, well, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
And I answer, well, I really wasn't in Kansas when I was in Kansas.
Yeah, and we left too in 1986 to the Bay Area as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So we lived out there for years, and I understand exactly what you're talking about with the frequencies and how it really messes with your head because you're with millions of people. And so it's very, you know, you just have to kind of figure your way out through it.
Yeah, you can adjust to it. Huh. Well,
So-
thank
Anyone else? Oh, yes, Philip and Craig. Oh, and Robin. Okay, first Philip and Craig.
Two of my favorite guys. Hi. You're wonderful. Look at that. May I introduce you? These people are famous. They really are. Here is Craig Johnson, and he is a world famous composer and, well, he's Craig, isn't he? You're Phil. I think I have you right. Anyway, Craig, maybe I've got your last. Anyway, I'm sorry. But anyway, he is a very famous composer and conductor and has done absolutely remarkable work. I'm sure his Kundalini runs full steam when he gets going. And he's won, is it an Emmy? Is that, wait a minute, I think you're muted. Unmute yourself over in the left-hand corner.
It doesn't look like you're muted, but we're not hearing you.
We don't hear you.
You could type your question and I'll read it.
Okay. And I'll keep talking while he's typing.
Well, Robin, did you have a question while they're typing theirs?
Yes, I just wanted to say it's been a near ecstatic experience meeting you, Dorothy Walters, and most of the people on this this call. Really, truly beautiful.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I can't say I've had a completely ecstatic experience. I think the closest I came was using LSD and feeling that you mentioned way back about cells, that we're all just
lit up.
The same cell, we're just different cells within the large cell organism of the universe. And I'd love to be able to duplicate that feeling without you know, the lysergic acid. But my question to you is, and your story is just remarkable. And I wondered finally, when you went to San Francisco or somewhere else, did you go into any kind of Kundalini community or reach out for a teacher? I don't see why you would need a teacher, but just for the community, I'm just curious if you had connections in that
Oh,
community.
I was very disappointed. I thought I would find communities, groups, teachers. But they probably were there, but I never found them. I found some marvelous friends that I loved. And I was able to speak openly to them. I appreciate it, and they supported me. This was not their experience, however. I never felt it. I don't think I found anybody who had an experience of Kundalini. I might have, I don't remember now. But one of my problems was that I never trusted external teachers because I had such powerful teaching coming from within.
Mm-hmm.
And I met Andrew Harvey, and he understood what this was all about. And was able to attend some classes there at CIIS. But I had a friend I could talk to on the telephone. She lived in Texas, and we would talk. But I never was able to get in contact with a group or circle, or I don't think so. I met many people who were on a spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
But I have often wondered how this does resemble a drug experience. But I was afraid to try that because one time I smoked some marijuana and it was a disaster. It was a total disaster. And I realized I can't do this. My nervous system became so sensitive. I had to be very careful. I couldn't even drink a cup of coffee without getting a reaction, you know. It was too much for me. So I've often wondered if this wasn't similar. I think a drug is released in the body. I think that's the physical component of this. I think when you have Kundalini, I'm sure that there's some physical component, but I don't know what it is. Well, I don't know. There's an interesting book, and it's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. And it's by a fellow, he's dead now, Isaac Pentoff. And his theory is that when the Kundalini rises, it goes through all these bodily centers, and that finally it is the pleasure center in the head that it goes across. And once that pleasure center is opened, then you can have more and more pleasurable experiences. It's a fun book.
Stalking the Wild, what is it?
Stalking the Wild Pendulum. You'd probably have to get it in a secondhand bookstore or something like that. I don't know that it's in print now, but it's a great book. He had a great theory. Stalking the Wild. He thinks that all of these centers, these pulse, what do I want to call them? All the centers like the pulse centers, that they entrain, that your head and your other centers, that they all get entrained, and then the ecstasy occurs. I don't know.
We have a request from Valerie. Would you please read a poem?
Me?
Not me.
Well, I could, although now this book is not a poetry book, but I have to confess it does have a few poems, and I didn't actually pick one, but give me a chance right quick. See, here's one. Here's the last poem. It's called Who I Am. And it's dedicated to Kundalini, the beloved within. That's what I call Kundalini, the beloved within. The Hindus call me the serpent of love. Shakti's, Shiva's own Shakti. That's it. The Hindus call me the serpent of love. Get my glasses here. Shiva's own Shakti, by whom the world is made. In Africa, I am Noom. I bring blessings and sweet healing. The Hebrews think of me as the Shekinah, and long for my presence. The Christians term me the Holy Spirit. I struck down Paul on his way to Damascus. I entered the room of the disciples during the Pentecost when light blazed over their heads. In Egypt, I am the magic elixir poured down into our bodies from the gods. When the goddess lived in Greece, I moved among the dancers. The shamans embrace me as they fly to heaven. I am the rapture of the saints, the suffering of the betrayed. I am inside you, in every cell and pore. I am without, in every stone and star. No one has seen me or held me in their hands. I am all that is. I am you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Did Craig and Phil ever get there?
Yes, yes. They typed the question. It says, we are not sure what's happening with our audio, but we'll try to ask this simply. Dorothy, do you encounter people who experience the divine as deeply as you do, but who do not reference Kundalini or have any knowledge of it as this named form of transmission? Just curious to know how important you feel it is to refer specifically to Kundalini.
Well, you could have Kundalini without calling it Kundalini. That's for sure. And you don't have to call it that. Call it anything you want to. Some people, as I say, call it the life force. And I named in this poem all the different names given to this energy. I think of it as the divine energy. No, you don't have to call it Kundalini. You don't have to follow a Hindu system. That's the one that spoke to me and still does speak. It just really gets me. I love it. But, in other cultures, they may not have heard of the word Kundalini. They have and that poem, I think, sort of expressed that idea, that in different places.
Well, the Western mystics didn't call it Kundalini, but they were having the same type of experience, right?
Well, yeah, they call it God, Holy Spirit be the what. But it's later, at this time, when we know more about Kundalini, many times we can identify and say, oh yeah, that's Kundalini. But they wouldn't have said that.
Right.
Oh, because it's with us. It's in us, it's with us. It's part of who we are. It's the life force.
It's natural.
And it's natural. It's very natural. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, you don't have to call it Kundalini. There are a lot of good names for it. I call it the beloved within.
Yeah. That's what Rumi called it, the beloved.
The beloved. The Sufis in particular are willing to talk about ecstasy, and they're willing to talk about the beloved. Most traditions won't. They'll call it maybe the friend or the God, to pray to God, the person in the sky or whatever. But the Sufis just come right out and call it the beloved and talk about it in terms of love language. And I love that Sufi world.
Yeah, I love the Sufi saying, love is of fire and I am wood.
Yeah, isn't that That's great. That's great. Rumi, by the way, is one of my great inspirations, really. Oh, and has been ever since I found out about him. Rumi and Hafiz and Kabir, Mirabai.
Stephanie is asking, can you spell the name of that book? Stalking the Wild. I didn't get that last word.
Pendulum. Pendulum. Pendulum, because he thinks
Pendulum. Oh, pendulum.
stalking the wild. He's taken off. You know, there have been books like Stalking the Wild Mushroom,
Asparagus.
and he's talking about those pendulums in your body that get in sync. They get in sync and they resonate together.
Pendulum. Okay. Well, Philip and Craig said, thank you. We love being with you here. Sorry for our audio issues.
Yeah, well, golly. golly. And by the way, if I could just get this in, my books are all on Amazon. That's the easiest place. And you can just look up my name and then it'll bring books. You can look up my name, it'll bring up, there's several YouTube presentations which describe aspects of this experience. I do a blog, which is kundalinisplendor.blogspot.com. Awful word, blogspot, but that's what you have to use. And then also Facebook. So I put, what I do when I write a poem, I put it up on those first. And then ultimately, if there are enough, I collect them into a book. And I'm doing a new book, which I hope would come out about next November. I'm not writing poems. I'm doing the hard part. And the hard part is the technical part of trying to get the poems ready and get them. You have to have a digital file and you have to prove it. And fortunately, I've got wonderful friends helping me. I'll mention Julie Podachevsky. She's just done wonderful work. First of all, setting up this file to take me 1,000,000 years to set it up. And then I have my friend Gail Thompson, in Wichita, who has offered to proof this manuscript. And she does a wonderful job. So I just am so supported. I'm so grateful. And then my basic publisher is called Emergent Education Press. And that is a marvelous publisher because they're not devoted to making the most money that they can. They are devoted to publishing books about the future. And I've so appreciated working with them. They're wonderful. And so you can get it from the actual Emergent Education Press, which is by the wife husband team that do this. She's Amy Edelstein, and actually this one is being edited by Jeff Correa. And they're both just marvelous to work with. I've had some horror stories trying to work with some publishers and editors. I could spend a whole session on bad experiences I've had, but these are wonderful people. I'm very fortunate to find them.
Well,
There's two hands raised. There's 2 participants.
We're almost out of time.
Well, who are they?
What's that?
2 participants raised hand.
Oh, really? Oh, Sharon, I see your hand is raised. I don't know what's that little blue hand. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, Dorothy. Thank you for today. My question is whether you have any sense or thoughts on whether awakenings can be connected or sparked. So whether interacting with someone who's maybe a little further along on their awakening can cause something to happen in you. I was just wondering, I know earlier you mentioned yours being more spontaneous. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on whether, because of the spreading that you sense, whether there's, in some cases, some connections between some of those.
Well, I do know this. Kundalini can be contagious.
I guess that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it's true. I've known cases where, say, the wife would have this awakening, and then pretty soon the husband would. That can happen. I think definitely being in the company of people who are perhaps more awakened than you are, you can, for one thing, it's an energetic transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up on their energies, and then that helps you in your experience. So I say yes. Now, it's also, I have to add, true, that sometimes it works the other way. One person in the partner, one partner gets awakened and the other does not. And it may lead to all sorts of difficulties, including an ultimate breakup. So you have to be prepared. But it can go either way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, was there another question we had? It says 2 raised hand.
Stephanie, you have your hand up?
Tell them to wave if they have a question.
Her camera's not working.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to see if you could repeat the name of that author of that book.
Of the Stalking the Wild Pendulum?
Yes.
Okay. That author is, it's not Isaac, but it's Itzhak, I-T-Z-A-K. Okay, Itzhak Bentov, B-E-N-T-H-O-V. It's a fun book. Old book. It's out of print, but you might be able to find a copy.
Right. Thank you. And I appreciate you coming from the same place I grew up in.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, I think that's it, and it's 6 o'clock. So I want to thank you, Dorothy, for joining us once again, and I hope you'll do it again soon. And I want to thank Aprylisa for helping out with the reading so Dorothy doesn't get too tired. And thank all of you for participating in this and attending it. And I hope we'll see you again soon. We have an event coming up in September on the 18th with Bernice Hill. Don't know if you're familiar with her. She will be doing an interview. I'll be interviewing her, and the title is her new book called Cosmic Human, Cosmic Intent. So we'll look forward to that. That'll be Friday, September 18th at 5:30 in the evening. So thank you all, and thank you, Dorothy. It's always such a pleasure to listen to you.
Well, thank you again, and thank everybody who came. This is, to me, very special. Very special. So, thank you.